Today I will tell you about the day I buried my son and why I chose silence when everyone else demanded words. After my son's funeral, I quietly kept silent that the will gave me his estate, the house, the land, and the accounts, all under my name. Until she showed her real face, I realized why he did it. Remember to like, subscribe, and share if you want to hear more grandma life stories, because behind every silence, there is a truth waiting to be uncovered. My name is Joanne Miller. I am 68 years old, a retired literature teacher in Asheville, North Carolina. I lost my husband when I was only 40, and for decades I thought I had already tasted the deepest sorrow life could serve. But nothing prepared me for the morning I buried my only son, Michael. The church was small, wooden, and old, with beams darkened by years of incense and hymn. White lilies lined the aisle, their fragrance heavy, almost suffocating. The organ played a slow, haunting melody, and every note pressed down on my chest like a stone. I sat in the front pew, my hands folded tightly around my bag. Inside was a letter Michael had written to me, along with his will. The coffin was closed, but in my mind I could still see his face, gentle, tired, and kind. My heart ached, yet my tears had already dried. It was not because I didn't love him enough, but because grief had hardened into something colder. At the altar, Evelyn, my daughter-in-law, stood with her son Lucas beside her. She wore a black dress that clung to her like a costume. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she spoke about her beloved husband. Her voice trembled, her hands shook, and the congregation wept with her. But when her eyes met mine, her expression shifted for just a second. Behind the veil of grief, I saw steel, calculation, resentment. They say funerals expose the living more than they honor the dead. That day, I learned how true it was. I squeezed my bag tighter, feeling the edge of the envelope inside. Michael's handwriting had been steady, though his life was slipping. In the will, he had left everything: our family home on the Blue Ridge Hill, the land in Henderson County, his cars and his savings, solely in my name. Nothing was left for Evelyn. He trusted me, not her. And though the truth weighed heavy, I remained silent. Michael's words still echoed in my mind from the letter he wrote. "Mom, if you are reading this, forgive me. I know Evelyn will never understand, but I need you to protect Lucas. Promise me you won't let her twist his future. He deserves love, not leverage." While Evelyn cried for the crowd, Lucas slipped away from her side. He came to me, his eyes red and swollen, his voice small but steady. "Grandma, Dad said you'll always keep me safe. Don't let anyone take me away." His little arms wrapped around me, trembling, and I held him tighter than ever before. A friend of mine, Mark Benson, sat nearby. He was a family lawyer and had known Michael since childhood. He leaned closer and whispered so only I could hear, "Michael trusted you, Joanne. Keep it, at least for Lucas. Don't let her win." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Mark saw it in my eyes. I understood. My silence was not weakness. It was my shield. When the service ended and the mourners trickled out, the church grew quiet. Stained glass light fell across Evelyn's face as she walked toward me. Her grief was gone. Her mouth curled into something sharper. "Joanne," she said in a low voice, "you have one thing left to do. Hand over the house and land. Michael was my husband. It belongs to me now. You're old, you don't need much anymore. Why cling to what should be mine?" I looked at her. I said nothing. My silence unsettled her more than anger ever could. For a moment I saw fear flicker in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with disdain. She turned away, scrolling through her phone as though the confrontation hadn't happened. In that moment, I understood what Michael had seen, why he had done what he did. Evelyn wanted me to beg, to break, to surrender on her terms, but I would not. I had Lucas's trust, Michael's final words, and the will that bound it all. My silence would be my weapon, and it would reveal her true face to everyone else. The funeral was over, but the real battle had only just begun. The night before, the funeral replayed in my mind as vividly as if it had just happened. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and sorrow. Machines beeped softly in the background, and every sound seemed to mark how little time was left. My son lay weak, his skin pale against the white sheets, yet his eyes were sharp, still carrying the light of the boy I once cradled. I sat by his bed, holding his hand. His grip was faint, but his gaze was steady. "Mom," he whispered, "I don't have long." "You know that." I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to cry. "Don't say that, Michael. You'll get better. You have to." He shook his head gently, a small smile forming on his lips. "You taught me never to lie, Mom. We both know the truth." Mark Benson, our longtime family lawyer and Michael's childhood friend, stood quietly at the corner of the room. He had a brown envelope tucked under his arm, the one I now carried with me everywhere. Michael lifted a trembling hand toward him. "Mark," he said, his voice weak but determined, "I need you to make sure this stands. My mother will be the executor. Everything. Our home, the land, the accounts, even the cars, it all goes to her name. Not Evelyn, not anyone else." Mark stepped forward, his expression serious. "Michael, are you certain? This decision will not be easy. Evelyn will fight it." "I know she will," Michael answered, his eyes flickering with a shadow of pain. "But she won't fight for Lucas. She'll fight for control, for money, for appearances. I can't leave my son in her hands alone. I trust my mother, only her." My heart clenched hearing those words. "Michael, don't do this because you think I need it. I don't. All I need is you." He turned his head slowly, looking directly at me. "Mom, listen to me. This isn't about money. It's about Lucas. He's only 8 years old. He needs protection, stability, love. Evelyn will raise him to resent, to bargain with life like it's a game. I can't let her shape him that way. You're the only one who will guide him with kindness. Promise me you'll keep him safe." Tears burned my eyes, but I forced myself to stay composed. "I promise, Michael. I will protect him with everything I have." His lips trembled into a faint smile. "That's why I wrote it all this way. People will say it's unfair that I was cruel to Evelyn, but the truth is she's already chosen her path. I've seen her eyes, Mom, cold when no one is looking, cruel when no one else is listening. She loves power more than people. You love without condition. That's what Lucas needs." I brushed his hair gently from his forehead, memorizing the lines of his face. "He will know who his father really was. I'll make sure he grows with your spirit in him." Michael's breathing grew shallower, but he held my hand tighter for one last moment. "Don't argue with her. Don't fight her openly. She feeds on conflict. Keep silent when you must. Act when it matters. Silence can be a weapon, Mom. Use it to protect Lucas. Use it to reveal her true self to the world." I felt my chest tighten with unbearable sorrow. "Michael, I wish you didn't have to carry such fear in your last moments." He shook his head faintly. "It's not fear, it's clarity. Promise me, Mom. Promise me you'll remember this." "I promise," I whispered, leaning down to press my forehead against his. Mark cleared his throat gently, stepping forward with the envelope. "Michael, if you sign here, it will be legally binding. No one can undo it unless the court finds it invalid, and with me as witness, that will not happen." Michael nodded, taking the pen with trembling fingers. He signed his name slowly, carefully, each stroke carrying the weight of his final decision. His hands shook so much that I had to hold the paper steady for him. When he finished, he looked at Mark. "Keep this safe until after the funeral," Michael said. "Give it to my mother when the time comes. She'll know what to do." Mark bowed his head. I will honor this, Michael. You have my word." Michael sank back against the pillows, exhausted. His eyes softened as he turned to me again. "Mom, when the time comes, don't let guilt poison you. People will call you selfish, but you'll know the truth. This isn't about taking, it's about protecting. Remember that." I bit my lip, holding back sobs. "I will carry your words, Michael. I'll make sure Lucas grows up knowing his father loved him enough to think of his future with every last breath." His eyes fluttered closed, but his lips moved one last time. "Thank you, Mom. I love you." The monitors beeped faintly, then slowed. I held his hand until it grew still, until the silence swallowed the room. That silence still followed me, even at the funeral, even as Evelyn demanded what was never hers. But whenever doubt tried to creep into my mind, I remembered Michael's voice, his steady conviction, and the weight of that envelope. His will was not greed, it was love, sealed in ink and signed with courage. And I knew, as long as I breathed, I would honor it. The funeral had ended only hours before, yet the house was already heavy with tension. White lilies from the service still lay on the dining table, their fragrance masking the bitterness in the air. I sat in my living room, the envelope tucked safely in a drawer behind me, when Evelyn walked in without knocking. Her black dress still clung to her like a shadow, but her eyes no longer carried tears. They carried hunger. She crossed her arms, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Joanne, let's not pretend. Michael is gone. There's no need to drag this out." I stayed quiet, folding the edge of my handkerchief between my fingers. She leaned closer, her tone sharp. "The house, the land, the accounts, those belong to me now. As his wife, that's my right. Hand over the papers. We can go to the lawyer tomorrow and make it official." I raised my eyes to hers but said nothing. Her gaze flickered, annoyed at my silence. "You think keeping them makes sense? You're old. You don't have long left. What will you even do with all this property? Sit in it until you die? Why cling to what isn't yours anymore?" Her words sliced through the room, each one deliberate, cruel. The muscles in my chest tightened, but I held my tongue. Michael's last words echoed inside me. Silence can be a weapon. I remembered his warning, and so I gripped the hem of my dress tighter, allowing her poison to fill the space unchecked. Her lips curled into a smirk. "Do you really think Michael wanted you to hoard everything? He married me, Joanne. Not you. I'm the one who built a life with him. I deserve the estate. And you—" She paused, tilting her head. "You're just a reminder of the past, weak, fading. Lucas doesn't need memories. He needs power, influence, opportunities that money can buy. Can you give him that? Number only, I can." My heart ached, not for her words against me, but for the child upstairs who could never thrive under that twisted definition of love. I opened my mouth slightly, but before a word could leave, small footsteps thundered down the staircase. Lucas appeared, still in his wrinkled suit from the funeral, his face pale but his eyes searching for me. He ran across the room and threw himself into my arms. His tiny fingers gripped my hand tightly, as though I were his anchor in a storm. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice trembling but clear. "Dad told me. You always keep me safe." The world around me froze. Evelyn stiffened, her painted smile faltering for just a second. I kissed the crown of Lucas's head, swallowing the knot in my throat. "Yes, my love. Always." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her mask slipping for a moment before she forced it back on. She took a step forward, her voice sugar-coated yet seething underneath. "Lucas, darling, go upstairs. Grandma is tired. She needs to rest. Come with me, and we'll talk about your future. You don't need to bother her with grown-up things." But Lucas clung to me even tighter. "I don't want to go with you. I want to stay with Grandma." His words were a knife, not to me, but to her. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Her hand twitched at her side. For a moment, the facade cracked, and the coldness Michael had spoken of revealed itself. I rubbed Lucas's back gently, steadying my own heartbeat. "He's tired," I said softly, the first words I had allowed myself to speak since she entered. "He needs rest." Evelyn's eyes flared. "This is not over, Joanne. You think your silence makes you strong, but it only delays the inevitable. The law will be on my side. When the time comes, you won't be able to stop me." I looked at her, calm and unshaken, though inside my veins burned with restrained fury. "Then let the law speak when it must. Until then, leave us be." Her laughter was sharp, mocking. "You overestimate yourself. You can't protect him forever." She spun on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the lilies on the table trembled. The house fell quiet again, except for Lucas's soft breathing as he buried his face against me. I held him close, rocking him gently. "It's all right, my darling. You don't have to be afraid." His small voice muffled against my chest. "She scares me, Grandma. Her eyes look mean. Dad told me to trust you. He said you'd know what to do." Tears slipped down my cheeks, but I didn't let my voice break. "Your father loved you more than anything, and he was right. I will protect you. That's my promise." In that moment, Evelyn's cruelty only strengthened my resolve. The estate, the papers, the wealth, none of it mattered to me personally. But to Lucas, it was a shield, a safeguard against the storm of his mother's ambition, and I would guard it with silence, with patience, and when the time came, with unshakable truth. Michael had been right. Tangled in her own greed, Evelyn would reveal herself in time. All I had to do was wait, protect Lucas, and keep my silence sharp as a blade. For now, silence was not weakness. It was power. The night after our first confrontation, I could not sleep. Lucas had finally drifted off in the small bedroom next to mine, his chest rising and falling with the innocence of a child who deserved peace. But my own chest carried weight. Evelyn's words still cut through the air. Her voice had been sharp, greedy, but beneath it, I had sensed something else. Desperation. I sat in the dark, staring out the window as the street lamps hummed. That was when I noticed her car. It had been parked a block away from my house all evening, and now its headlights flickered on. Curiosity drew me to the curtain. Evelyn's black sedan rolled slowly to the corner and stopped. Another car, larger and tinted, pulled beside it. I watched as Evelyn climbed into the passenger seat. Even at a distance, I could see her stiff posture, the way her hands twisted together. A man was waiting for her. His shoulders were broad, his profile harsh under the glow of a streetlight. I could not hear their words, but his body language said enough. He leaned in close, pointing a finger at her. Evelyn's head dropped. She shook it quickly. Then he slammed his fist against the steering wheel. She flinched. My stomach turned. For a few seconds, the silence outside pressed harder than any scream. Then, faintly, through the glass, his voice carried. "If you don't have my money by the end of the month," he snarled, "don't blame me for what happens next." I covered my mouth, the reality crashing in. Evelyn wasn't just greedy, she was drowning. Her response was muffled, choked. I could see her shoulders tremble. She reached for her purse, fumbling inside, as if trying to offer something, anything to appease him. But he shoved her hand away. She pressed her palms to her face, breaking down in tears right there in the passenger seat. I had never seen Evelyn cry alone. At the funeral, her tears were public, staged, a performance for sympathy. But this was raw, cracking her mask into pieces. She shook her head violently, as if the world around her was collapsing. The man's face twisted with impatience. He opened the door, leaned halfway out, and spat on the pavement before sliding back into his seat. His words were colder this time. "No more excuses. You've had long enough. Get it done." Evelyn nodded rapidly, desperate, her tears streaking down her cheeks. She clutched her knees, curling in on herself like a frightened child. The door slammed, the other car sped away, and she remained there, alone in her own vehicle. I pulled back from the curtain, my heart racing. I had known Evelyn to be manipulative, yes. Selfish, yes. But now the pieces fit together in a darker picture. The estate, the money, the relentless pressure she had placed on me, all of it was not merely ambition. It was survival, or at least her twisted version of it. Still, pity did not come easily, because her desperation endangered Lucas. Her choices, her debts, her lies, they threatened his stability, his safety. That I could not forgive. When I returned to my chair, I whispered into the quiet room, more to myself than anyone. Michael, you were right. She cannot be trusted. The next morning, Evelyn appeared at my door. Her face was carefully painted again, hair smoothed, voice dripping with forced sweetness. "Joanne," she said, "perhaps we started on the wrong foot. We both love Lucas. Surely we can find common ground." I studied her carefully. Only hours ago she had been trembling, pleading with a stranger in the night. Now she stood as though nothing had broken her. The duality chilled me. She stepped inside without waiting for permission, placing a hand on the back of a chair. "I think we should talk about the future. Lucas deserves the best schools, the best opportunities. You know how expensive that is. If you release some funds, just a portion, it would show goodwill. It would prove you aren't trying to keep everything to yourself." Her words were smooth, but her hands betrayed her. They shook slightly as she tucked them behind her back. I heard again the threat from the man in the car. 1 month. That was the deadline pressing on her shoulders. I didn't answer her right away. I let silence fill the space, watching her composure strain under it. Finally, I said, "Evelyn, if you need money, you should earn it honestly. Lucas's father left instructions. I intend to honor them." Her smile faltered. "You think stubbornness makes you noble? It makes you cruel. You'll ruin everything." I leaned forward, my voice low, steady. What ruins everything is debt that drags people into darkness. If you've tangled yourself with something dangerous, that is your burden. Don't try to shift it onto Lucas or onto me. For a moment, her eyes widened. She knew I had glimpsed the truth. But then, like a mask snapping back into place, she scoffed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "You imagine things. I don't owe anyone anything." Yet her trembling fingers betrayed her. She stormed out soon after, slamming the door with the same force as before. But I no longer felt the sting of her hostility. Now I held a sharper weapon, knowledge. I walked to Lucas's room and looked at him sleeping soundly, the morning sun on his face. "Your father saw through her," I whispered, "and now I do too." From that night onward, I knew the fight ahead was not just about inheritance. It was about unmasking the shadows Evelyn carried and ensuring those shadows never swallowed Lucas whole. The house was quiet that evening, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the silence that pressed against your ears, as though something unsaid was hovering in every corner. I sat in the living room, knitting half-heartedly, my thoughts tangled far worse than the yarn in my hands. Lucas sat at the dining table nearby, pencil scratching faintly over his homework. He had been so steady through the chaos of the funeral, the tension with his mother, the abrupt change of living mostly under my roof, yet I could see the weight behind his eyes. After a while, the scratching of his pencil stopped. He looked at me, hesitant at first, then leaned closer, lowering his voice as though afraid the walls might listen. "Grandma," he whispered, "why does Mom always lock her room at night?" I froze. The needle slipped from my hand and clattered softly onto the armchair. My breath caught in my chest. He twirled the pencil between his fingers nervously. "Sometimes I hear her talking on the phone. She doesn't want me to hear. She talks real quiet, but sometimes she sounds angry or scared. Why does she do that?" My throat tightened. Children should not have to notice such things, yet Lucas's eyes carried the sharpness of someone forced to grow up too quickly. He was asking me, but I could tell he already sensed the truth. His mother was hiding something. I reached out, brushing a hand over his hair. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "sometimes adults keep secrets because they're afraid. It doesn't mean those secrets are good ones." Lucas frowned. His small voice carried more gravity than any child should hold. "Dad told me once that if someone hides things, it's usually because they don't want people to know what they're really doing." He looked down at his homework, his hand trembling slightly. "I think Mom doesn't want you to know either." My chest ached. Out of the mouths of children came the truth adults often ignored. "Did your dad say that to you often?" I asked softly. Lucas nodded. He said Mom was complicated. He said, "If anything ever happens to me, trust Grandma. She'll keep you safe." I felt tears burn at the corner of my eyes, but I swallowed them down. I couldn't afford to show weakness in front of him. "Your father loved you very much," I murmured, steadying my voice, "and he trusted me to protect you. That's what I'll do." Lucas leaned closer, lowering his voice even more. "Last night, I woke up for water. I saw Mom in the hallway talking on the phone. She was crying and she said, 'I promise I'll get the money. Just give me a little more time.'" Every word from his lips hit like a nail, sealing the truth I had already begun to uncover. Evelyn's debts, her secrecy, her aggression. It was all part of a storm she had pulled into our lives, and now her own son had noticed. I took a deep breath, forcing calm into my tone. "Lucas, thank you for telling me. You're very brave." He shook his head. "I'm not brave. I don't want her to get hurt. Or you." I wrapped my arms around him, pulling him against my chest. His little body was warm, trembling slightly under the weight of things no child should bear. "Listen to me, darling," I whispered. "Whatever happens, you're not alone. I will never let anyone hurt you. Do you understand?" His arms tightened around me. "I believe you, Grandma." For a long moment, we stayed like that, the two of us holding on in the dim light of the lamp. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint sound of distant traffic. But inside, a different current was building, an alliance, forged between a child and his grandmother, against the shadows threatening to consume their world. When Lucas finally pulled back, his face carried a look too old for his age. "If Mom asks you for money," he said seriously, "don't give it to her. Please. I think that's what Dad wanted." I nodded, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I won't. I promise." That night, after tucking him into bed, I stood in the hallway staring at Evelyn's closed door. Behind it, her whispers continued, muffled words, promises, bargaining with someone unseen. My grandson's innocent question had confirmed what my instincts already knew. Evelyn's hunger for the estate was not just greed, but desperation born of a danger she kept chained behind locked doors and late-night calls. And now, Lucas was not only the one I had to protect, he had become the one showing me where to look, what to guard against. He was the key. The child who saw through the cracks adults tried so hard to plaster over. As I finally turned away and headed to my own room, I whispered into the silence, "Michael, your son understands more than we ever thought, and he's the reason I will not fail." The night stretched long, filled with murmurs behind Evelyn's door. But I no longer felt blind. Lucas had unlocked the truth, and with that truth came both fear and resolve. The battle lines were clearer than ever, and I knew exactly where I stood. The next morning, I walked up the narrow stairway to Mark's law office. The building was old brick, tucked into the corner of Asheville's main street. Inside, the scent of leather-bound books and faintly polished wood filled the air, a place where silence carried more weight than chatter. Mark stood as I entered, tall but slightly weary, his sleeves rolled up as though he had been buried in casework since dawn. He gave me a warm nod. "Joanne, I'm glad you came." I sank into the chair across from him, clasping my hands tightly in my lap. My heart carried both gratitude and fear, and I wasn't sure which was heavier. For a moment he shuffled through papers, but then he paused, staring down at them as though the letters blurred before his eyes. He exhaled slowly. "Before we go further, there's something I should tell you." I tilted my head. "What is it?" He leaned back, his expression troubled. "Years ago, I represented a woman not so different from you, a mother. She had just lost her husband and she was fighting to keep her children. The other side painted her as unstable, unfit, and I—" His voice faltered. He pressed his lips together, searching for words. I didn't see it coming. I underestimated how ruthless people could be. She lost custody, 2 kids taken away. I see her face every time I walk into a courtroom. The confession hit me harder than I expected. His voice wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was raw, breaking open an old scar. "Mark," I said softly, my throat tightening. He looked down at his hands, clasped together on the desk. The knuckles whitened as though he could still feel the weight of that loss. I vowed I'd never let it happen again, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear her words. She asked me, "Why didn't you fight harder?" And I had no answer. The air between us was heavy with regret. I could almost see the ghost of that mother in the room with us. Mark finally lifted his gaze, eyes steady now, resolute. "This time, Joanne, I won't let history repeat itself. Evelyn may think she can intimidate you, manipulate the law, bend things to her advantage, but I've seen how it ends if we underestimate. I will not make that mistake again." I felt a strange mixture of sadness for the man across from me and a flicker of relief. His pain, though heavy, had forged him into someone who would not abandon me now. "I believe you," I whispered. He leaned forward, lowering his voice, almost as if confiding a secret. "I've already begun preparing. Evelyn's debts, her behavior, if she pushes for custody or control of the estate, we'll be ready. But you need to be strong, too. The court doesn't just see papers, it sees people. If you show them what Lucas means to you and what you mean to him, we'll win." His words steadied something inside me. "Lucas is my world," I said almost fiercely. "I won't let her tear him apart." Mark's eyes softened. "That's exactly what the court needs to see. Not fear, not bitterness, just love strong enough to protect him." He paused, then reached across the desk. His hand closed around mine, firm, almost desperate. "I'm telling you this, Joanne, because I need you to know. I carry scars, but I will fight with everything I have left to make sure you don't carry the same ones." My hand trembled under his, not from fear, but from the surge of strength that his words planted in me. For the first time since Michael's death, I felt as though I wasn't standing alone against Evelyn's storm. I nodded, meeting his gaze. "Then we fight together." A silence fell between us, not awkward, but filled with something unspoken, trust forged in grief and determination. Mark released my hand slowly, his voice steady once more. "There will be moments ahead where Evelyn will try to break you. She'll use words that cut, threats that make you doubt yourself. When that happens, remember this, she doesn't see the whole picture. But Lucas does, and so do I." I swallowed hard, committing those words to memory. When I rose to leave, the weight on my chest felt different. Not gone, but shared. Mark walked me to the door, his tone softer as he added, "Joanne, you are not just a client to me. You're someone whose fight matters, and this time, I won't fail." As I stepped into the sunlight outside, the world felt a little less daunting. The brick streets of Asheville stretched before me, the sound of church bells ringing faintly in the distance. I clutched my bag close to my chest and whispered under my breath, "Michael, You chose the right person to help us. He carries his own wounds, but maybe that's why he'll fight harder, for me and for Lucas. And for the first time in weeks, I believed it. That evening, Evelyn suggested we have dinner together at the old house. She framed it as a gesture of family unity, her voice sugary sweet over the phone. Against my better judgment, I agreed, mostly for Lucas's sake. He deserved some sense of normalcy, even if the walls of that house still whispered with Michael's absence. When I arrived, the dining table was already set. Candles flickered against polished silverware, and the aroma of roasted chicken filled the room. Evelyn greeted me with a smile too bright, her tone practiced. "Joanne, I wanted us to share a meal, to remind ourselves that we're still family." Lucas sat at the end of the table, his small hands folded neatly, his eyes darting between us with cautious curiosity. Throughout the meal, Evelyn laughed a little too loudly, complimented me in ways that rang hollow, and asked Lucas about his schoolwork as if she were the perfect doting mother. For a while, I stayed quiet, pushing my food around the plate. I could feel the performance she was staging, not for me, but for the boy who watched everything. After dessert, Lucas excused himself to finish homework in his room upstairs. His footsteps echoed away, leaving silence between Evelyn and me. Her smile faded almost instantly. She set down her wine glass with a sharp clink against the table. Her eyes hardened. "Let's stop pretending." I kept my gaze steady, though my stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping into a hiss. "I mean the estate, the house, the land, the accounts, all sitting under your name. If you don't sign them over, I'll make sure everyone in this town thinks you're nothing but a greedy old woman who stole from her widowed daughter-in-law." The shift in tone was so stark it chilled the air. Gone was the sweet hostess. In her place sat a woman with venom in her veins. I took a slow breath, refusing to let her see me shaken. Michael left those things because he trusted me to protect Lucas. That's all this is about. Not greed, not me. She scoffed, her lips curling. "Do you really think anyone will believe that? An old woman clinging to property she doesn't even need. You're alone, Joanne. People will side with me. They'll pity me." Her words cut deep, but anger sparked within me, pushing aside fear. I lifted my chin and met her glare head on. "You may twist stories, Evelyn, but truth has a way of rising. I don't need to scream it from the rooftops. It speaks for itself." For a moment, her facade cracked. Her eyes flickered with something darker, desperation. She clenched her jaw, fingers drumming against the table. "You think you're clever, but you have no idea what I'm capable of." The room was heavy with her threat, yet beneath her sharpness I caught a trace of something else. Panic. I remembered Lucas's words about her locked door, her whispered phone calls at night. It wasn't just greed driving her, it was fear. I steadied my breath. "Evelyn, this isn't a game. You're not just risking money or land, you're risking Lucas's heart. Do you think he won't see who you really are if you keep down this path?" Her face twisted, half fury, half disbelief that I dared speak so plainly. "Lucas is my son. He'll always side with me." I shook my head slowly. Children may love their parents, but they also see more than you think. He sees, and he feels. One day, the mask you wear will slip, and he will know. For a long, tense moment, neither of us moved. The candles flickered between us, casting shadows across her sharp expression. Finally, she stood abruptly, chair scraping against the wooden floor. "This conversation is over," she snapped. "But mark my words, Joanne, I will not be pushed aside." She stormed from the dining room, her heels clicking down the hall, leaving me alone at the long table. My hands trembled slightly, but my heart beat with a strange steadiness. Yes, she had threatened me. Yes, she intended to make me look like the villain. But for the first time, I realized she was cracking. The mask had fallen, even if only for a moment, and I had seen the truth. When I climbed the stairs to check on Lucas later, he looked up from his desk, eyes wide with unspoken questions. I knelt beside him, smoothing his hair. "Ba?" he whispered. I gave him a small, reassuring smile. "Don't worry, sweetheart. No matter what anyone says, the truth will take care of itself." And in that quiet moment, I held on to the strength Michael had left me, the strength to stand firm, even as Evelyn's storm gathered. A few days after that tense dinner with Evelyn, I received a call from Mark. His tone was measured, almost hesitant. "Joanne, could you come by my office this afternoon? There's something you need to see." I felt a knot form in my stomach. The way he spoke told me it wasn't simple paperwork. I agreed, and within an hour I was seated across from him in his modest office, the late afternoon sun filtering through the blinds. Mark didn't start with small talk. He folded his hands, studied me with quiet seriousness, and then slid a thin folder across the desk. "I debated showing you this, but after what you told me about Evelyn's threats, you deserve to know the full picture." I hesitated, my fingertips trembling as I lifted the folder. Inside were printed screenshots of text messages, conversations that made my chest constrict. The first message was from Michael, dated months before his illness had worsened. "Why are you still seeing him, Evelyn? Don't you realize what this does to us?" Her reply was chilling in its casualness. "You don't understand. He gives me what I need. You don't. Stop acting like a victim." I gasped softly, my breath catching. My son had discovered her betrayal and carried it silently. Mark's voice was low, careful. "Michael brought these to me once. He said he hadn't confronted her fully yet. He wanted advice, but then his health declined, and before we could revisit it, he passed." I couldn't tear my eyes from the words on the page. Each message revealed more cruelty, more selfishness. Evelyn mocking him, dismissing his fears, writing things no husband should ever read. One exchange burned into me. "Michael, do you ever think about Lucas? What will happen if he finds out?" "Evelyn, Lucas will never know. He needs me, not you." I pressed the papers against my chest as though trying to shield Michael's memory from the poison on them. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced them back, swallowing the ache in my throat. "Mark," I whispered, "this is why he changed his will. This is why he told me. He only trusted me with Lucas. He knew she wasn't just careless, she was unfaithful. She would betray not only him, but the boy, too." Mark nodded gravely. "Exactly. This isn't about money, Joanne. Michael's decision wasn't selfish, it was protective. He saw what Evelyn was capable of, and he acted while he still had the strength." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. Memories of my son's tired smile, the way he had pressed my hand in those last days, came flooding back. His silence then made sense now. He had carried this burden, shielding Lucas, shielding even me. When I opened my eyes, Mark leaned forward, his tone resolute. "If Evelyn tries to challenge the will, this is admissible evidence. It establishes motive. It shows Michael wasn't irrational. He acted out of clear, painful knowledge." I looked at him, my voice breaking. "And yet, part of me still wishes I hadn't seen this. It hurts, Mark. Knowing my son endured this betrayal in his final days." He reached across the desk, placing his hand gently over mine. "Sometimes truth is sharp, Joanne, but it also defends. Don't see it only as pain. See it as Michael's last shield for Lucas, entrusted to you." I clutched the papers again, feeling both devastated and strangely fortified. This was more than a legal document. It was the unspoken chapter of my son's life, one he hadn't lived long enough to voice aloud. I thought of Evelyn's false smiles, her sharp threats, the way she had looked me in the eye and dared to twist the truth. Now I understood the desperation in her eyes. She wasn't just chasing wealth. She was covering her own disgrace, terrified that the mask would fall. Standing, I steadied myself. "Thank you, Mark. I needed this, even if it breaks me." He gave a solemn nod. "Joanne, you're stronger than you know. Michael saw that too. That's why. He trusted you." As I left his office, the weight in my hands felt heavier than paper. It was my son's voice from beyond the grave, finally explaining his choices, vindicating his trust in me. Driving home, I replayed Evelyn's threats, her smug confidence that she could paint me as greedy. I almost pitied her now, because the truth was sharper than any lie she could weave, and when the time came, it would cut through her pretense like glass. When I reached home, Lucas greeted me at the door with his usual innocent smile. "Bah, you look tired. Are you okay?" I bent down, wrapping him tightly in my arms, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I just learned something important today, something that proves your daddy loved you and wanted you safe more than anything." He hugged me back without fully understanding, and I silently vowed never to let Evelyn's betrayal shape his future. Michael's trust, Mark's support, and my own resolve would stand against her, no matter how bitter the battle ahead. For the first time in weeks, I felt not only sorrow, but clarity. Evelyn's mask had slipped at dinner, but now I held the key to expose her entirely, and I knew I would not falter. That night, the house felt unusually still. I had just tucked Lucas into bed, kissed his forehead, and whispered goodnight. He seemed calm, but there was a restlessness in his eyes, the kind only a child carries when he senses that the grown-ups around him are hiding storms. I went back to my room, trying to calm my thoughts after the revelation Mark had shared earlier that day. My hand still trembled when I recalled the texts. Evelyn's betrayal was no longer just suspicion. It was truth etched in ink. Yet I had no idea how close another storm was brewing under the same roof. Lucas couldn't sleep. Later, he told me he kept hearing the faint vibration of his mother's phone through the walls. He slipped out of bed, padding quietly down the hallway on bare feet. The door to Evelyn's room wasn't shut all the way. A thin sliver of light spilled onto the floorboards. Inside, Evelyn's voice was low but sharp, carrying enough venom to freeze a child in place. Lucas pressed himself against the wall, listening. "If you give me the money, I swear I'll disappear. I'll leave this suffocating town behind," she hissed into the phone. "All I need is what's rightfully mine. Once I get control of the accounts, I'm gone." There was a pause. Lucas could hear her tapping her nails against the dresser. Then she added with a bitter laugh, "They think I'm desperate, but once I cash out, they'll never see me again. Not my son, not his old witch of a grandmother. No one." The words cut into Lucas like glass. He bit his lip hard, tears stinging his eyes. He didn't understand everything about inheritance or accounts, but he understood enough. His mother wasn't planning a future with him in it. His heart pounded. He backed away, careful not to creak the floorboards, then turned and ran down the hallway. His small fists trembled as he reached my room and pushed the door open. "Bah, bah," he whispered urgently, his little chest heaving. I sat up instantly, alarmed by his pale face. "Lucas, what is it, sweetheart?" He clambered onto the bed, clutching my arm. "I heard Mama. She was on the phone. She said she wants money, and then she'll leave. She said she'll go away and not see us anymore." His voice cracked. "She called you a witch." My breath caught. I pulled him into my arms, feeling the tremor in his small body. I stroked his hair gently, steadying him even as my own chest twisted. "Shh. It's okay, Lucas. You're safe. I promise you, you're safe." But inside, my mind raced. This was confirmation of what I had feared. Evelyn's desperation had reached its peak. She was plotting to vanish, leaving behind destruction and even her own child. Lucas looked up at me, his eyes wide and glistening. "Why would she say that, Ba? Doesn't she love me?" I cupped his face, forcing my voice to be steady, though my heart broke. "Lucas, love is not always what people show. Your Mama. She's confused. She's lost. But you are not to blame. Do you hear me? You are loved more than anything in this world. By me. By your father. Always." He nodded slowly, burying his face against my chest. I felt his hot tears soak through my blouse. I held him tighter, whispering promises, as much for him as for myself. When his breathing finally calmed, I guided him back under the covers. He clung to my hand. "Please don't let her take me away." My throat closed, but I forced the words out, strong and steady. "I won't. I'll never let anyone take you from me." He drifted into uneasy sleep, still gripping my fingers. I sat by his bed long after, staring at his innocent face, the weight of Michael's silent knowledge, Mark's evidence, and now Lucas's frightened confession pressed down on me. Evelyn had crossed from selfishness into something darker, something reckless. She wasn't just dangerous to me, she was dangerous to her own son. I realized then that children in their innocence often uncover truths adults overlook. Lucas hadn't meant to spy. He had simply wandered into the raw edge of reality, and in doing so, he had revealed Evelyn's final card. By dawn, I had made up my mind. Evelyn believed she could manipulate, threaten, and ultimately abandon, but she hadn't counted on her own son being the one to unravel her facade. And she hadn't counted on the strength of a grandmother whose love ran deeper than fear. I kissed Lucas's forehead as he stirred awake, whispering softly, "Thank you, my brave boy. You've given me the truth I needed." Inside, a flame of resolve burned brighter. The battle with Evelyn was far from over, but now, with both proof and Lucas's innocent testimony, I knew I could face it without trembling. I had barely settled into the quiet of my living room when I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel outside. My heart tightened. Visitors this late in the evening were rare, and after everything that had unfolded, I no longer trusted unexpected knocks at my door. The sound came, 3 deliberate heavy raps, not the polite tapping of a neighbor, something darker. I rose slowly, steadying myself with the armrest. "Who could that be?" I muttered under my breath. Lucas had already gone to bed, Mark was still at his office, and Evelyn had retreated to her room hours ago after a day of cold avoidance. I straightened my cardigan, walked to the door, and opened it just enough to see who stood on the porch. A tall man loomed there, his silhouette filling the frame. His coat collar was turned up, and under the porch light, his face looked sharp, worn, and impatient. "You're Joanne?" he asked, his voice carrying the rough edge of someone used to demanding things. "Yes," I said carefully, gripping the doorframe. "And you are?" He smirked without humor. "Name's Daryl. Your daughter-in-law owes me a substantial sum. I was told I might find her here. Since she's nowhere to be seen, I figured maybe you'd prefer to settle her little problem before things get ugly." I felt a chill crawl down my arms. So it was true. Evelyn's debts weren't whispers anymore. They were flesh and blood, standing on my porch demanding repayment. I drew a slow breath, reminding myself not to let fear dictate my words. "Mr. Daryl," I said firmly, "you're at the wrong door. I don't owe you a cent." His eyes narrowed. "Come on, lady. We both know family looks after each other. She's living under your roof, isn't she? Eating your food? Maybe you're even protecting her. That makes this your business, too." Behind me, the old wooden stairs creaked. I glanced over my shoulder and caught a shadow shifting at the top landing. Evelyn was there, half hidden in the dark, clutching the railing, her face pale. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stared down at the confrontation, her lips parted in silent dread. I turned back to the man. "Listen closely," I said, forcing steel into my voice. "You will not stand on my porch and suggest I pay for someone else's mistakes. If Evelyn owes you money, that's between the two of you. Don't drag me or my grandson into it." He leaned forward, his boots heavy on the step, his breath reeking faintly of cigarettes. "Lady, I don't think you understand how this works. If she doesn't pay, someone's gotta. Otherwise, things get complicated. For a moment, my knees trembled, but I straightened, drawing on something deeper. Michael's voice reminding me once, "Mom, you've survived worse storms." I held Daryl's gaze. Number, I won't be intimidated in my own home. Evelyn is grown. She made her choices. I did not sign her papers. I did not take her loans, and I will not clean up after her. The silence stretched, taut and dangerous. Finally, Daryl barked a laugh. "You've got more backbone than most. Fine, I'll be back for her. And if she thinks she can hide behind you, she's dead wrong." He jabbed a finger toward the doorway before turning and stalking back to his truck. Gravel spat under his tires as he sped away into the night. I exhaled, my hand shaking as I closed the door. My pulse still thudded hard in my ears. Slowly, I turned my head upward toward the stairs. Evelyn remained frozen in place, her face caught between anger and shame. "You heard every word," I said quietly, though my voice carried in the stillness. Her eyes flickered, but she offered no defense, only silence, heavy and guilty. I stepped closer to the staircase, my voice steadying. "Do you see what your choices bring to this house? You've endangered my grandson. You've dragged strangers to my door. And you thought I'd carry your debts on my shoulders just as you tried to steal Michael's legacy. But I won't." Finally, Evelyn whispered, her voice shaking. "You don't understand." "No," I cut her off sharply. "I understand perfectly. You're drowning, and you'd rather drag us all down than admit the truth, but I will not let you, not this time." Her eyes glistened with suppressed fury, but she stayed rooted on the steps, speechless. I turned away, choosing not to grant her another ounce of my attention. As I walked back into the living room, Lucas's small voice carried from down the hall. "Grandma." Who was that? I softened, forcing calm into my tone. "Just someone who came to the wrong house, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. Everything's fine." But inside, I knew things were far from fine. Tonight had stripped away the last layer of Evelyn's facade. She was not just greedy. She was reckless, dangerous, and desperate enough to gamble with everyone's safety. Still, I also knew something else. The more she tried to corner me, the more I had to stand taller. Michael had trusted me with his son's future, and I would not betray that trust. Not for Evelyn's debts, not for her threats, not for anything. And though she tried to hide in the shadows, I had seen her face clearly tonight. The mask was gone. She knew it. I knew it. And soon, the whole town would know it too. The house was unusually quiet that night. I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of chamomile tea cooling between my palms, while the old clock ticked steadily against the silence. Lucas had gone to bed hours ago, and I had hoped Evelyn would do the same. But as the minutes passed, I heard faint clinking sounds from the living room, the distinct chime of glass against glass. I rose and moved closer, careful not to startle her. The sight stopped me cold. Evelyn sat slouched on the couch, a nearly empty bottle of red wine on the coffee table. Her hair fell in messy strands, her blouse wrinkled, and her cheeks blotched from drink. She wasn't putting on her usual performance tonight. Her mask had slipped. "I don't know how to do this," she muttered to herself, her voice breaking. She wiped at her eyes, but the tears kept coming. "I don't know how to be a mother. James always knew how to reach him. He made it look so easy. But me? I only know how to ruin things." Her words pierced me. For the first time, I saw a crack in her hard exterior, and part of me almost felt pity. Almost. Because while her grief might have been genuine, I couldn't forget the cruelty she had shown when sober, the manipulations, the venom behind her threats. As I stood frozen in the doorway, I noticed movement down the hall. Lucas had padded out of his room, rubbing his sleepy eyes. He must have heard her voice. His small figure lingered just beyond the edge of the living room light. He tilted his head, confused, worried. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling with hope that maybe, just maybe, this softer side was real. Evelyn jerked her head up, startled. Her glass clattered on the table, spilling crimson wine across the wood. For a fleeting second, she looked vulnerable, eyes red, lips trembling, shoulders shaking under invisible weight. But the moment vanished like smoke. She hardened instantly, as though shame had burned her tenderness away. "Go back to bed, Lucas," she snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut. He blinked at her, stunned. "But you were crying." Her jaw clenched. "I said go to bed. This is none of your concern. Don't meddle in grown-up matters." Lucas's small hands balled into fists at his sides, his face twisting in hurt. I could see the battle inside him, wanting to comfort his mother but recoiling from her rejection. Finally, his shoulders slumped, and he turned back toward the hallway, his bare feet silent on the floor. Evelyn collapsed against the couch cushions, muttering under her breath, "Why can't anyone just leave me alone?" She grabbed the bottle and took another long swallow, as though drowning her weakness before anyone could witness it again. I stayed hidden in the shadows, my chest aching. Watching my grandson shrink from his mother's cruelty filled me with both sorrow and fury. She had let him glimpse her humanity and then slammed the door on him before he could step through. It was crueler than her usual coldness. It dangled hope before snatching it away. Later, when Evelyn finally staggered off to her room, I found Lucas sitting on the edge of his bed, eyes downcast. I sat beside him, smoothing his hair. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" He shook his head. "Grandma, why does she push me away? Did I do something wrong?" My throat tightened. I pulled him into my arms, letting him rest his head on my shoulder. "No, darling, you've done nothing wrong. Sometimes people hurt others because they're hurting inside. It doesn't make it fair, and it doesn't make it right. But it's never your fault." He sniffled quietly, clinging to me. "She doesn't love me the way Dad did. He always listened. He never yelled at me like that." I kissed the top of his head, holding back my own tears. "Your father loved you more than anything, and I love you just the same. That will never change. And even if your mother doesn't know how to show it, deep down, she does love you. She just doesn't know how to be the parent you need." Lucas leaned into me, silent, his breathing slowing as exhaustion overtook him. I tucked him into bed, pulling the blanket up to his chin. Watching his innocent face relax into sleep, I felt a surge of resolve harden inside me. Evelyn might flash moments of weakness, but they were fleeting, drowned as quickly as they surfaced. She refused to grow, refused to change, even when her own child stood before her aching for warmth. And that, more than anything, showed me why Michael had chosen me to carry this burden. He had seen through her long before the rest of us dared admit it. As I closed Lucas's door, I thought back to the sight of her tears, the raw whisper of her confession. A small part of me wanted to cling to that shred of humanity, but it wasn't enough. Not after everything. Her weakness didn't absolve her sins. It only made her more dangerous, unpredictable, like a flame that flickers just before it burns down the house. I returned to my own room, lying awake as the night stretched on. The image of Lucas's wounded eyes replayed in my mind, fueling my determination. This wasn't just about protecting an inheritance anymore. It was about shielding him from the chaos Evelyn carried like a storm cloud. And I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that if she didn't break herself, she would break him. That was a cost I would never allow. The next few weeks passed under a cloud of unease. Evelyn's demeanor shifted in subtle ways. Her sharp words became laced with a forced politeness, and she moved with a kind of restless urgency. I had seen enough of her to recognize the signs. She was planning something. One morning, Mark arrived earlier than usual. He carried his leather briefcase and a file tucked under his arm, his expression taut with suspicion. "Joanne," he said, after settling at my kitchen table, I think Evelyn is attempting something far more dangerous than intimidation. My heart sank. What do you mean? He opened the file and laid out photocopies of legal documents. I leaned closer, scanning the crisp, typed pages. At first, they looked like standard probate filings, stamped with the county court seal. But then I noticed subtle inconsistencies. The signature at the bottom curved differently. The font on one paragraph didn't match the rest. "This," Mark said, tapping the page, "is a forgery. Someone tried to recreate your son's will, but altered the beneficiary line. It lists Evelyn as the sole heir. If it weren't for the poor quality of the forgery, it might have slipped past unnoticed." My stomach twisted. How could she even get her hands on something like this? Mark's jaw tightened. From what I can gather, she may have approached a clerk who works in the court office, someone desperate enough to take her money. This isn't uncommon, sadly, but it's also criminal, and it won't hold up once we present the real records. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the rapid beat of my heart. So she's willing to risk prison just to take everything from me, and from Lucas. Mark nodded grimly. Desperation makes people reckless, and Evelyn is nothing if not desperate. Later that day, as I sat with Lucas doing his homework at the dining table, I heard Evelyn's voice carrying from the porch. The words were hushed, but sharp, tinged with menace. I crept closer to the window, straining to catch them. "This better look real or you'll regret it," she hissed into her phone. "I'm not paying you to make mistakes. When the judge sees it, I want her to think Michael himself signed it." I froze, bile rising in my throat. She wasn't even careful anymore. She believed she was untouchable, that intimidation could silence anyone who stood in her way. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Michael's handwriting, the way he looped his letters, the deliberate care he took with his signature. The thought of Evelyn reducing his memory to a weapon, a counterfeit tool for greed, made me sick. The next day, Mark returned with more news. "I've traced the paper trail. Evelyn withdrew a large sum of cash recently, and one of the court clerks has been suddenly living beyond his means. It's circumstantial, but it's enough to raise eyebrows." "What can we do?" I asked, forcing calm even as anxiety gnawed at me. "We stay ahead of her," Mark replied firmly. "I'll file a motion to verify the authenticity of all submitted wills. That way, when she presents the forgery, the court will require a forensic handwriting analysis. Her scheme will collapse before it even gets off the ground." I exhaled, my shoulders sagging with relief. But there was still fear beneath it all. Evelyn was a cornered animal, and cornered animals lashed out. That evening, Evelyn breezed into the kitchen, her smile a little too wide. "Mother Joanne," she said sweetly, "I know we've had our disagreements, but I think we can find common ground. I've been speaking with people at the court, and I believe things will resolve soon. You'll see. It'll be easier for everyone if we stop fighting." Her eyes glittered with false warmth, and for the first time, I realized she believed she was winning. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "The truth doesn't bend, Evelyn. You can twist it. You can try to bury it, but eventually, it rises." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she turned away, muttering under her breath. Later, when Lucas was asleep, I sat in my room holding Michael's original will. My fingers traced his signature, the real one, the one written with steady conviction. Tears pricked my eyes as I whispered into the quiet, "I won't let her erase you, son." Not like this. The following week, Mark called with confirmation. Evelyn's false documents had been submitted to the court. He sounded almost relieved. "This is good, Joanne. It means she's overplayed her hand. We can prove fraud, and fraud changes everything in the eyes of the law." I clutched the phone tightly, torn between relief and dread. We were closer to exposing her, yes, but the thought of Evelyn unraveling, realizing her grand scheme was about to fail, filled me with unease. What would she do when the walls closed in? As I hung up the phone, I glanced down the hallway toward Lucas's room. His steady breathing was faint but comforting. I knew one thing with certainty. Evelyn's games had crossed a line. She was no longer just scheming for property. She was tampering with the law itself. And once people like her start to believe rules don't apply, the danger multiplies. Mark's words echoed in my mind. Desperation makes people reckless. I could feel it in my bones. The storm wasn't over. It was only beginning. For weeks, I had kept quiet. I had listened, observed, gathered. My silence had been both armor and shield. But now, as Evelyn's schemes grew bolder, I knew that silence would no longer protect the truth. That morning, I dressed Lucas in his best shirt and told him gently, "We're going into town today. I want you to see something important." He looked at me curiously, his eyes still carrying the innocence his mother had tried to dim. At Mark's office, I placed Michael's letters on the polished wooden desk. They were letters he had written years ago, not meant for lawyers or courts, but for his son. Words of love, guidance, and memory. I handed one to Lucas and encouraged him to read aloud. His small voice filled the room. "Dear Lucas, I may not always be near, but I want you to know you are my pride and joy. No matter what happens, remember that love is your anchor. Hold on to it, and you'll never be lost." Lucas's voice cracked on the last line, and he pressed the paper to his chest. His eyes shimmered with tears, but he smiled faintly. "Dad really wrote this," he whispered. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Yes, darling, and that's why no false paper can erase him. The truth of who he was lives in these words, and in you." Mark leaned forward, his gaze steady. "This is more powerful than any argument I can make. Authentic handwriting, personal tone, undeniable proof. If Evelyn presents a forged will, this will dismantle her claim completely." Lucas clutched the letter tightly, as if it were a lifeline. I felt the weight of Michael's presence in the room, as though his voice still lingered between us. That same afternoon, Mark and I walked into the courthouse. I held a file thicker than my own hand, every document carefully prepared. Evelyn was there already, leaning against the corridor wall with false confidence painted on her face. She smirked as she saw me, but the smirk faltered when she noticed Lucas holding Michael's letters with fierce protectiveness. Inside the clerk's office, I placed the original will, Michael's letters, and the forensic report on the table. My hands did not tremble. For the first time since his death, I felt clarity instead of fear. The clerk looked uneasy as he examined the pages. Mark's voice was firm. "We are formally filing evidence of attempted fraud. The handwriting analysis confirms these signatures were forged, while these letters, authenticated, match Michael's true signature. The contrast is undeniable." Evelyn shifted in her seat, crossing and uncrossing her legs. Her eyes darted from the clerk to me. "This is unnecessary," she snapped. "Michael wanted me to have everything. He told me so before he died." I turned to her, my voice steady. "Then why did you need to pay someone to create lies on his behalf?" The silence that followed was heavy. Even Lucas looked up, his small face hard with a determination I hadn't seen before. Later, as we left the courthouse, Lucas slipped his hand into mine. "Grandma," he whispered, "does this mean she can't take Dad's house away?" I squeezed his hand. "It means she can try, but we won't let her succeed. We have the truth. That's stronger than her greed." That night, as I sat at my kitchen table, exhaustion washed over me, but it was accompanied by something else, a fire I hadn't felt in years. My mind replayed the words I wanted Lucas to remember, the same words Michael had written. "Love is your anchor." I realized then that protecting Lucas meant more than shielding him from Evelyn's cruelty. It meant showing him that courage could be quiet, but it also had to rise when the time was right. As I folded the letters back into their envelopes, I spoke softly, half to myself, half to Michael. There is a time when silence is a weapon, but there is also a time when the truth must be spoken. Lucas, sitting nearby with his crayons, glanced up. "What did you say, Grandma?" I smiled gently. "I said that we fight lies with the truth, and we never let fear make us small." He nodded solemnly, as if the weight of those words settled into him. The next morning, Evelyn stormed into the house. She was furious, her face flushed, her voice sharp. "You think you've won because you waved some old letters around? The court hasn't ruled yet, Joanne. Don't get comfortable." I stood tall, unflinching. "I don't need to win, Evelyn. The truth already has, and deep down, you know it." For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt. A crack in the armor she wore so brazenly. After she slammed the door and left, Lucas came running in. "Grandma, were you scared?" I crouched down, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, but courage isn't about not being scared. It's about standing firm anyway." He threw his arms around me, and I held him tightly, feeling the fragile strength of his small body. In that embrace, I knew we had turned a corner. We were no longer just defending against Evelyn's cruelty. We were standing against her, side by side, with truth as our shield. And for the first time since Michael's funeral, I believed we had a fighting chance. The courthouse conference room was quiet except for the faint ticking of a wall clock. Evelyn sat across from me, her arms folded, her chin lifted in defiance. Her eyes glittered with malice as she leaned forward. "You really think you've won, Joanne?" she spat, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't fool yourself. I'll take back everything. The house, the land, the accounts, everything Michael left behind will be mine again." I stayed still, my hands folded in my lap, but I felt the storm gathering in my chest. Before I could answer, Mark calmly slid a folder across the table toward her. His tone was measured, almost disarmingly polite. "Before you make any more declarations, Evelyn, perhaps you should take a look at this." Her eyes narrowed. She snatched the folder and flipped it open. Inside was the forensic report, the notarized statement from the court clerk, and most damning of all, the photocopy of the forged will she had tried to pass off as genuine. Mark's voice was steady, precise. "This is your handiwork, isn't it? We have the testimony of the clerk you paid, we have the financial trail, and we have proof that the signature is not Michael's." For a moment, Evelyn stared blankly at the page, then her face drained of color. The mask she always wore, the arrogance, the superiority, slipped. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. I watched her chest rise and fall in shallow, panicked breaths. She looked cornered, like a predator who had finally realized she was prey. Lucas had been quiet until now, sitting close to me, holding the letters his father had written, but suddenly his voice cracked through the silence. His words were raw, unfiltered, a child's plea that carried more weight than any accusation. "Mom, why?" His little hands shook as he clutched the papers. "Why would you lie? Why would you try to take Dad's things? He trusted you. I trusted you." The room froze. Evelyn turned toward him, her eyes wide with something between shock and shame. Tears pooled, but she blinked them back with stubborn pride. I only wanted security," she stammered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how else to survive." But Lucas shook his head violently, tears spilling down his cheeks. "No, you didn't want to survive. You wanted more. You wanted everything, even if it meant hurting me, hurting Grandma." His words struck like thunder. The child who had endured her coldness was now holding her accountable in front of everyone. Evelyn covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders heaved as though the weight of every lie, every cruel word, every selfish choice had finally collapsed on her all at once. Mark's gaze softened for a moment, but his words remained resolute. "This is the end of the line, Evelyn. There's no talking your way out. The evidence is clear. The law will not protect you." I should have felt only triumph. For so long she had tormented me, belittled me, tried to strip me of dignity and security, and now here she was, unmasked, undone. Yet as I looked at her slumped figure, I also felt something else. Not sympathy exactly, but a sorrow that things had come to this. Lucas crawled into my lap, sobbing into my shoulder. I wrapped my arms around him, my heart breaking for the boy who had seen too much, who had learned too early that the people we love can betray us. I whispered into his hair, "It's over, sweetheart. She can't hurt us anymore." Evelyn lowered her hands and looked at us, mother-in-law and grandson bound together in grief and resolve. For the first time, there was no venom in her eyes, only exhaustion. Her voice was hollow when she spoke. "I lost Michael, and then I lost myself." I held Lucas tighter, not answering. Some truths needed no reply. The clerk stepped into the room then, signaling that the hearing would proceed soon. Evelyn didn't resist when the bailiff approached to escort her. She rose slowly, her movements heavy, as though each step cost her something she no longer possessed. As she left, Lucas lifted his head from my shoulder. "Grandma," he whispered, "is it really finished?" I kissed his forehead gently. "Yes, darling. She built her life on lies, and lies can't stand forever. Today, the truth stood taller." He nodded, his small hand gripping mine tightly. When the door closed behind Evelyn, the silence left behind was different, no longer suffocating, but freeing. I breathed deeply, realizing that for the first time since Michael's funeral, the shadow hanging over us had begun to lift. I looked at Mark and said quietly, "Thank you. Not just for the law, but for helping me carry the weight." He smiled faintly. "You carried it longer than anyone else could. Today, you put it down." As I left the courthouse hand in hand with Lucas, the autumn wind swept across my face. It was cool, sharp, alive. People often said justice was cold, but to me, it felt like a breath of air after being buried too long. I glanced down at Lucas, who was watching the ground thoughtfully. "Grandma," he said softly, "Dad would be proud of you." My throat tightened, and I blinked back tears. "No, sweetheart, he'd be proud of us, of you, because even when the lies tried to bury the truth, we held on to it together." And as we walked into, worse, the fading light, I knew the story wasn't over yet. There was still healing to be done, wounds to mend, futures to rebuild. But Evelyn's collapse had been the turning point. Justice wasn't just served, it was felt, deep in the heart, leaving behind not bitterness, but a fragile sense of peace. The gavel struck once, firm and clear, echoing through the courtroom. The judge's voice carried no hesitation as he read the verdict aloud. The court finds that the last will and testament of Michael Bennett, as presented by the defense, is authentic and legally binding. All listed assets, including the family home, the accounts, and associated holdings, remain in the possession of Joanne Bennett, as designated by the deceased. I closed my eyes for a brief second, letting the words settle. Not as triumph, but as release. The weight I had carried for so long lifted, little by little, until all that remained was stillness. Evelyn sat frozen for a moment, her eyes vacant, her lips pressed thin. The fight was gone. No more sharp words, no more venom. She stood slowly, shoulders hunched, her once commanding presence reduced to something fragile, almost ghost-like. Without looking at me, she gathered her purse and walked toward the door. Through the tall windows, I could see the drizzle outside turning into steady rain. She stepped into it without an umbrella, her figure swallowed by the gray curtain. For all her cruelty, for all her schemes, I felt no desire to gloat. Only a quiet sadness that a woman so gifted with life had chosen to waste it chasing power. Lucas gripped my hand tightly. His small fingers trembled. "Grandma, is it really ours now?" I turned to him, my heart softening at his wide, uncertain eyes. I knelt down, brushing a strand of damp hair from his forehead. Yes, Lucas, the house is yours. Not because of courts or papers, but because it holds your father's memories. It belongs to you and to the love he left behind. Tears welled in his eyes, but this time they weren't the tears of confusion or fear. They were lighter, like rain washing away months of heaviness. He buried his face in my shoulder, whispering, "Thank you for keeping him with me." I held him close, feeling his heartbeat against mine. "Always," I whispered back. "That was my promise to your father, and now it's my promise to you." Mark joined us, setting his files aside. His expression was steady, but there was a flicker of warmth in his eyes. "Joanne, you fought with dignity. You never stooped to her level. That's what will stay with Lucas more than anything. The way you chose truth over vengeance." I nodded slowly. He was right. I hadn't wanted victory at any cost. What I wanted was protection, stability, a place where a child could still grow with hope instead of fear. As we left the courthouse, the air smelled of rain-soaked earth. Evelyn's figure was long gone, vanished into the city's blur. I wondered if she would ever find peace, or if she would spend the rest of her life running from herself. But that was no longer mine to carry. Lucas skipped a little beside me, splashing into a shallow puddle. For the first time in weeks, he laughed. Really laughed, the sound clear and unguarded. I found myself smiling too, the kind of smile that starts in the chest and rises slowly, steady, unshakable. At the threshold of our home, I paused. The door was the same one Michael had opened so many evenings, the same wood his hands had touched. I placed my palm against it, a silent vow. "Lucas," I said softly, "this house is not just walls and windows. It's your father's love, our family's history. I'll protect it for you until you're ready to protect it yourself." He nodded solemnly, then looked up at me with a kind of wisdom children should not need so young. "And we'll fill it with new memories too, right?" My throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart. New memories. Ones filled with kindness and laughter, not fear." That night, after Lucas had fallen asleep clutching his father's letters, I stood by the window watching the rain taper off. The moonlight broke through the clouds, silver and calm. In its glow, I whispered words I knew only my heart would hear. "Michael, I kept my word. I kept him safe, and I will keep on keeping him safe." The silence that followed was not empty. It felt full of peace, of promise, of something eternal. When I finally lay down to rest, I thought of everything that had passed. Evelyn's ambition, the forged lies, the near loss of everything we held dear. And yet at the end, it was not vengeance that lingered. It was something higher, something steadier. Justice had spoken, but not for revenge. Justice had spoken for protection. I thought of Lucas's future, of birthdays and graduations, of quiet dinners and loud celebrations, of the steady rhythm of an ordinary life. That was what I had fought for, not wealth, not pride, but the chance for him to live without shadows. As dawn began to break, painting the horizon with soft light, I knew this chapter had closed, not with bitterness, but with fulfillment. The story wasn't one of defeat or conquest, but of holding on to truth until it prevailed. I whispered one last thought before sleep finally came. Justice is not for revenge. It is for protection, and protection sometimes is nothing more than keeping a promise alive.